it was amazing. The service that Jocelyn and Lena were describing, the speaker had all of the youth leaders stand up and surround the chapel and pray for the kids. And as they were praying, he offered the invitation, and to watch our kids give their life to Christ and rededicate their lives. It was the most humbling and proud moment I've probably ever experienced, just to be a part of that. Because I had nothing to do with it, Josh had nothing to do with it, Carrie had nothing to do with it. God just used us as just his tools to help them, and it was so cool to see that, and it was the coolest thing I've ever been a part of. But anyway, so I didn't introduce myself, so sorry. I'm Luke. I'm one of our youth leaders for our youth group. I teach math at Baldwin Area High School, and whenever I tell people that, I usually get one of two reactions. I see some weird faces, kind of like what I'm seeing right now, and the people say, I hate math. And I say, it's great, I really like it. And then, or there's the, pat on the shoulder, good for you, man. But yeah, I love math. It's great, and despite what the majority of society says, math is cool. All right, math is cool. Thank you. Yeah, math's great. All right, and you need math every day in your life. And if you want to have that argument, I will win it. I'll win it. Because I have it every single day with a bunch of high school kids that don't want to do homework. So, yeah, I get a lot of practice at that. All right, so before I say anything too silly, I'm going to pray, or else I'll say something ridiculous. Anyway, let's pray. Daddy God, I thank you for this morning. I thank you for this day. And I thank you for this opportunity for us as a youth group to help lead your church. God, right now, I pray that you shut me up. I pray that I don't use your words. I'm sorry, I pray that I don't use mine. See, there we go. I pray that I don't use mine. I use your words. I pray that the Holy Spirit speaks through me and that I give your message. God, we love you. And you're the rest of you stand up. Amen. I have to pray that prayer or else I'm going to say something really dumb. Anyway, so Jesse back there, okay? Jesse probably has the hardest job in church because that's the most finicky projector-computer combination there is. And it seems like every time I preach, something technologically weird happens. The first time I preached here, I need to print out my sermon. So I thought, okay, I'll just show up early and I'll print it out. Couldn't get the printer to work. That was interesting. And then the second time the projector wasn't working, and then this morning I get here Avery's all worked up because we can't get the projector to work. And then we tried for a half hour, and then we got it to work, and then it stopped working again, and then we somehow figured it out, and now if you touch that cord, the computer may blow up. So don't touch it. But anyway, the people who run the slides every morning, like I know sometimes we blame it on them for things not working right, but it's not their fault. I promise. It's just the computer being weird. But yeah, so Jesse's doing a great job. All right. So our series theme throughout this summer is called Jesus Friends. So the friends of Jesus. And we're going to be talking about the people Jesus spent the most time with, what those people talked about, and what that means for us. So last week, Pastor Josh shared with us that Jesus was a friend of sinners, meaning that he was a friend with the people who were less desirable at that point in time, and the people that the religious rulers didn't think that Jesus should be hanging out with, and that made them really uncomfortable. And what that teaches us, it teaches us that sometimes if we follow Jesus, it's going to put us in situations that are uncomfortable. But those situations are totally worth it because in those uncomfortable situations, we still have Jesus, which is what's more important than anything. Whenever I think about the friends of Jesus, I think about the people closest to him as best friends. I think about the disciples. And the 12 disciples specifically, because he had a lot of people who followed him, but then he had these 12 dudes that were really, really close with him, that he hung out with, that he spent all his time with. These guys were an interesting group of dudes. Very, very diverse. There was a bunch of fishermen. There was a tax collector, who in that time, nobody liked the tax collectors, but Jesus was like, hey, come on, man, let's hang out. There was a zealot, who all he wanted to do was just start a rebellion and overthrow the Roman government. And Jesus is like, whoa, man, calm down. We'll get there. And there are a bunch of other tradesmen. I learned something recently about the disciples that I didn't know about. And the past November, Josh and I were at a youth leaders conference called Next. The church sent us there. It was awesome. But the entire time we were there, the speakers and the workshop leaders kept talking about how these disciples were a bunch of teenagers. What the heck? These guys are teenagers? I always thought like they were a bunch of like full-grown men with big gnarly beards sitting around a table with Jesus. And that's what I always thought. And I'm like, this doesn't sound right. But then I started to think about it. All right? The disciples did some weird things. Okay? I started thinking about what they actually did. And all the times these disciples did and said really, really silly things. For example, in Matthew 14, the story of Jesus feeding the 5,000. Okay, there's this group of people that are listening to Jesus all day long, and they got hungry, which people do. But there's 5,000 of them. And Jesus is like, well, we got to feed all of them. The disciples are like, well, how are we going to do that, Jesus? There's 5,000 people. And Jesus says, give me some bread and fish, and we'll feed them. And then Jesus fed 5,000 people. Pretty cool. Now, what's really weird is the next chapter. I'm not sure how much time was in between chapter 14 and 15, but the next chapter, a similar thing happened. There were 4,000 people this time, so 1,000 less, but still a lot of people that were listening to Jesus, but they got hungry. And Jesus is like, well, I guess we got to feed the people. And the disciples say, Jesus, how the heck are we going to do that? There's 4,000 people, we're not going to be able to feed them. And I can only imagine Jesus like, guys, come on. Like a week ago, we just did this. Were you not paying attention? So there was that. And then there was another time where the disciples were on their boat, and they're out just a little bit too far for Jesus to swim out to the boat, because he was away from them for a little bit. So Jesus, naturally decides, I'll just walk out to them. So Jesus is out there walking on the water, which is, okay, that's pretty weird, just to see someone walking on the water. But the disciples have been hanging out with Jesus literally all the time, and I'm sure they've seen Jesus do some weird things. All right, some crazy stuff. Like, there's the miracles recorded in the Bible, but I bet every now and then Jesus just did something like goofy just to make the disciples laugh. But anyway, so they see Jesus walking on the water, and they know Jesus isn't with them, and they know Jesus is like, hey, I'll meet up with you guys later. But their first reaction was, ghost! And Jesus is like, guys, it's me. All right, come on. Not a ghost. And then Peter walks out and falls in the water. But anyway, and then there's another time where the disciples, they're hanging out and they're like, hey, Jesus, which one of us is your favorite? And here I bet Jesus is like, I'm not even answering this question. He probably just wanted to turn away. But then he probably thought, you know what, WWJD. All right. And then he gives them an answer that probably didn't make any sense to him. And he probably did this on purpose, just because he's ticked off the disciples when having this conversation. He says, he who is the least among you will become the greatest. The disciples were like, what? And then they went and did disciple things. But anyway, so the more I thought about it, the more it started to make sense that these disciples could have been teenagers. They could have been a bunch of middle school and high school kids. So I did a little bit of research. And it turns out that that's culturally accurate. That some of the disciples may have been in their middle years. They may have been high school age. Which is really weird to think about. But if you think, James and John, whenever Jesus called them, they were out in their fishing boat with their dad. Which that means they were probably apprentices to their father as fishermen. And whenever Jesus called them, they left the fishing boat from their dad. They left their job and started following Jesus. So being apprentices at that point in time meant they were probably in their teenage years. So those guys were probably teenagers. All right? Also, the Bible refers to Jesus several times as rabbi or teacher. And at that time in history, whenever someone really wanted to learn more about the Bible, wanted to learn more about God, what they did was they picked a rabbi, they picked a teacher to start following. And they did that between the ages of 13 and 15. So there were probably several of the disciples that did that. They thought, this guy's a really cool teacher, I'm going to start following him. And they would have been really, really young. Now, some of the disciples were definitely adults, like Matthew, who was a tax collector. He was definitely an adult. And then Peter was probably an adult too because he was married. But that doesn't mean Peter didn't act like a high school kid. I mean, yeah. Peter, his mouth just ran, and he didn't really think about what he did too much. I mean, so, all right, someone's coming to kidnap your friend. Your first reaction is whip out a sword and cut off the ear. I don't know. Seems like a very high school thing to do. Even though he's a man, he was still acting like a high schooler. But anyway, so this is starting to make more and more sense. All right? And to me, what this means is, man, Jesus was a youth pastor. How crazy is that? He just hung out with a bunch of high school kids all day long. Okay? He picked 12 dudes to spend all this time with him, invest all this time in. And I can imagine that was a pretty crazy and fun experience. Like Jocelyn said, our kids are crazy, okay? But, I mean, we have a good group that meshes together and they level each other out. I can imagine there's some quite the characters in this crew. They were just nuts, okay? I bet Jesus spent the majority of his days, trying to corral a bunch of kids into doing one thing, all right? He had to be repetitive a lot. Jesus repeats himself a lot in the Bible, and that makes sense because probably half of them were listening, the other half were staring at clouds, stuff like that, all right? And he had to be very literal in his teaching. He taught really, really cool ways that was easy for high school kids to understand. So, it starts to make more and more sense. And if I start to think about it, I can kind of relate to Jesus. Jesus being a youth pastor, I spend all day with kids as a teacher. And I can understand how, sometimes you got to teach things really, really, really literally, and you have to repeat yourself. But then if I also think about it, I'm a lot like disciples, because I'm a goofball. I spend probably 90% of my day controlling myself from not doing silly things. And if you ask the rest of the leadership in the church, they'll agree with us in this, that Josh and I are a bunch of goofballs. The last church meeting we had started late because Josh and I were arguing which birds were the dumbest. And Deb was very kindly in pointing out in this, and that makes sense because she's a teacher and she does the same thing. And then also, Josh and I have a running argument on whether or not sauerkraut is good or not. I think it's delicious. He doesn't. But anyway, so we're just goofballs. We're silly. So I can relate to Jesus in the fact that he was a teacher, but also the disciples being a bunch of goofballs. But anyway, so the best friends of Jesus, the people he spent the most time, were half of them, or at least were teenagers. And this is awesome. All right? Jesus was setting an example for us and how we should bring up the next generation. He surrounded himself with a small group of people that he taught. And that's a great example. Okay, he taught very literally. The way he taught was with parables, which are just stories. And they're stories that are really easy to remember, and he often explained those stories to his disciples, which allowed them to understand it and they can remember it really easily. And that right there, that's good pedagogy. Pedagogy is like good teaching, basically. If you're not a teacher, you don't know what pedagogy means. I just think it's a fun word to say. Pedagogy. Let's all say pedagogy. Pedagogy. That's fun. Anyway, so Jesus used parables to teach his disciples, and that worked out really, really well for him. And the thought of using a parable came to mind for me one time when I was writing a youth lesson. We were, at that point in time, the church was talking about the story, where there was creation, the fall, restoration, and resurrection, which is really, really cool. And we were going through that along with the church, explaining it more, getting a little bit more in depth about those. But when you try to look at the whole story as a whole, it can be really, really difficult because there's so much in it. And there's a lot going on. There's a lot of stuff that's kind of difficult to understand. And one night, whenever I was thinking about this, I was trying to think about how am I going to get these kids to understand the concept of restoration. That's what we were specifically talking about. Which, by the way, that retreat going on, the theme was restoration. And literally the week before, here at church, Josh, or was it Jeremy? Somebody spoke on restoration. And then the very next Thursday, we spoke about restoration. We had no idea that the retreat was going to be called Restored, which is, I think that's just the Holy Spirit working, doing some really cool stuff, kind of connecting everything for our kids so they can finally get it, which was awesome. But anyway, the Holy Spirit kind of told me this parable that helped me understand the story and would probably help our kids understand it. And they really, really liked it. And so, in trying to figure out what we're going to do this Sunday, they decided it'd be really cool if you guys heard it too. So I'm going to let you guys listen to a parable. So, there's this man, okay, and he built a house. Now, this just wasn't like a normal house. This was like the nicest house you could think of. It was a mansion. It was huge. Anything you could think of that's in a good house, this was better. It had high ceilings. It had tons of rooms. It had room for everybody to do whatever they wanted. If you want to run around in circles and play games, there's room for this. If you wanted to sit down on the couch and drink a nice cup of coffee, room for that too, okay? There was a huge dining room, a huge dining room table, so your whole family could come over and all eat together. Best house in the world. And the builder's like, man, this is a pretty cool house. But what's a house without any people to live in it? Okay, so he thought, this isn't enough. I can't just keep this house to myself. I need to give it to somebody. So he decided to do something. He decided he was going to sell the house. Then he thought, no, I'm not selling it. I'm going to give it away. All right, I'm going to give it to my best friends. So he gave this house to a young couple. And he says to them, this house is yours. Everything in this house is yours. The land, yours. It's all yours. You can have it for free. You can do whatever you want with it. All I ask is that you treat it, and you treat it with love, and you love it the same way that I do. You care about it the same way that I do. And you know what? It'd be cool if I come and visit every now and then and hang out with you guys. If you guys are okay with it, then the house is yours. And the couple agreed. And things were great. The young couple were ecstatic. They had this brand new, beautiful mansion. And things were going great. The builder, he showed up, and he's every now and then knocked on the door, and they would eat together. And they would walk in the trails around the house, and they would sit around campfires. And things were perfect. They were awesome. But one day, something different happened. They heard a knock on the door. The young couple opened it. They were late. And there was this new man in town. This guy was pretty sly. He was good with his words, and he was deceptive. And he talked his way into the couple letting in his house. And he was slick with his words, and he deceived the young couple. And then he convinced the young couple to let them stay in the house. And the young couple let him. And then the new man, the sly guy, he started to wreak havoc in the house. He broke all the windows. He ripped up the carpet, punched holes in the drywall, scratched out the hardwood floors, started to ruin the place. He ripped out the sinks. He desecrated the house. And the sad thing is, the young couple just went along with it. They let it happen. The new man lied to the young couple. He said to them, it's better this way. It's better if the house is this way. That old way, it doesn't. No. This is the way the house should be. It should be like this. And the builder saw this. He saw everything that was happening to the house. It made him really sad. He got really upset about it. And he knew with the house the way it was now, and the way the couple was now, he wasn't going to be able to visit anymore. He couldn't bear to see the house the way it was. And so, time went on. Things got worse. The beautiful house was now reduced to an oversized shack. But the builder didn't give up. He would often send letters to the young couple, write them, and he even sent a couple of messengers to talk to them, to tell them, like, hey, you guys shouldn't be living this way. Like, you can fix up this house. It can be nice again. You can make it the way it's supposed to be. And the young couple would get inspired. They would get excited. And they would fix up the house a little bit. But the slick man was still there. And he would just tear it down. He would just tear down the old couple, mess up the walls again, break everything that was fixed. And after a while, the builder couldn't take it anymore. He knew that this house needed to be fixed. But more importantly, he knew that the couple that lived in it needed to be saved. They needed to be saved from the life that they were living and the place that they were living in. So the builder turned to his son, carpenter. This carpenter was there at the beginning. He helped build the house. He helped pound the nails. He was right there with his father building it. The builder said to his son, son, we need to save this house. We need to save the couple living in it. I need you to do this. You need to save the people that live in the house. And like a good son, he left the builder. He went to the house and he knocked on the door. And the sly man opened the door. And the carpenter says, hey, I'm here to fix the house. I'm here to make it the way that it's supposed to be. To which the slick man said, no, this is my house. You can't have it. You're not allowed to fix it. This is my house now. And then the carpenter responds. He says, well, what if I buy the house from you? What if I buy it back? What if I buy it back from you and the couple? I'll take ownership of it. I'll take the house just as it is. You don't need to fix anything or nothing. I'll take it broken down. I'll take the couple too. They can still live in it, but I'll buy the house. All right, I'll take care of it. I'm willing to pay for it. I'm willing to pay the price. And without hesitation, the slick man says, I don't think you can pay that price. To get this house, you have to give everything. Not just money, everything. Without skipping a beat, the carpenter says, okay, I'll do it. I'll give up everything. I don't care what it takes. I'm buying this house back. This house is my father's house. It's my house, and I'm buying it back, and I don't care what it takes. Slick man was offered something he couldn't refuse, so he took the offer. And the carpenter gave up everything. He even gave up his life for the house. The sly man accepted. They shook hands. The house was the carpenter's again. It was the builder's again. And now that the builder had the house back, the carpenter had the house back. Okay, now think about it. Did they leave the house the way it was? No. They fixed it up. They made it the way it was supposed to be. They patched the walls. They installed new windows. They even put on a few additions. Made it perfect. And, for lack of better terms, they cleaned house. They fixed everything. They restored it, if you will. No matter what needed done, they fixed it. So, and if you didn't catch those parallels there, I think it kind of became pretty obvious towards the end. I'm going to quickly explain what was going on in that story.